everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Before we get right into it, I wanted to welcome Campfire Tales to tonight's episode. He provided and narrated the last story you'll hear tonight. Absolutely check out his channel, as he's got loads of stories and does a fantastic job telling them. I've linked his channel in the description. Okay, have you ever been so sure that you saw something one way, only for it to be something else entirely? Kindergarten, I thought I saw this puppy on the playground, a Dalmatian. I just couldn't wait to get out there and pet that dog. We got out there, and as I got closer, I realized it wasn't a dog. For a moment, I was scared, but as I grew closer, I realized it was a small pile of black jerseys and a few soccer balls. Disappointing, but not terrifying. Tonight's stories are a little different in that, rubbing their eyes, walking a bit closer, these actions won't change the fact that what they're seeing or hearing, it isn't at all familiar, and it's entirely terrifying. So, let's get started, shall we? My husband and I go camping every year, usually somewhere near the Appalachians in Tennessee. Well, in 2021, the pickings were a little scarce since park employees hadn't quite bounced back to the same numbers prior to 2020. Since we had our RV, we ended up picking a place that we'd never stayed before, Up the Creek RV Camp. I loved this place instantly. So much wildlife, plenty of trees for shade, and of course, it was along a creek. We found a spot almost immediately that was perfect. We got set up and we decided to do as the name suggested and make our way up the creek. We have 2 dogs. Maggie is a senior dog, some sort of Chihuahua Terrier mix. She's small. And Chance, the other, he's also a mutt. We think Blue Heeler and possibly Lab. Well, he was just a little over a year at the time, so very much a puppy. Maggie is my baby. She's always been my best hiking buddy, despite being just a little thing. Since she now has arthritis in most of her body, she sits in this backpack sling that my best friend custom made for me that we've nicknamed a buggy. This way, she can still go on hikes with me. Anyways, Maggie is a good girl, especially for her breed being a small dog. She hardly barks or does much of any noise making. I mention all of this because it feels relevant and I love my dog. So, I've got Maggie in her buggy. My husband's got Chance on a leash, and we're making our way along the creek, enjoying the weather and the calmness of the whole area. It was like we were the only ones in the whole park. It seemed like things were normal and calm like this for a long time, almost the entire way up the creek. But I felt like Maggie was making noises. Nothing too alarming, but I started to notice it more. Right around the time that Maggie started making noises, I noticed that Chance stopped chasing after every squirrel he saw, or trying to anyway. At the time, I thought that maybe he was just learning, but I've come to think otherwise. But anyways, we were having a good time being out and about and getting this new boy used to the outdoors. It wasn't until about the time that we were going to turn to head back that I heard something unusual. First, it was what I thought was Maggie making some more whining noises, just louder. I asked my husband, who's standing to my right, just slightly ahead, if he can look at Maggie, make sure everything's okay. He slows down, I match his pace, and then we both stop so he can look at Maggie. He tells me that she's not really whining, at least not anymore, but she is intent on looking at something. Like what? Is she stressed? I asked my husband. But then we both hear something. It sounds like people talking. My husband and I just look at each other and continue standing in silence. We didn't recall seeing anyone. We can't make out any words, but it sounds like it's all around us. Again, Maggie starts whining. This time, my husband sees and confirms my suspicions that my dog is whining and appears to be in distress. After a moment, we hear what sounds like heavy footsteps. They sound like they're coming from a person or something on two legs. We both sort of give each other the signal to turn around and head back. When we do, we're shocked to see the largest pair of antlers we've ever seen. They're poking above the bushes off to the left side of the trail that line the camp. These bushes are easily 6 feet tall. There's no reason for antlers to be sticking out this far. My husband gets yanked forward. It's Chance, trying to make a run for it, but he yanks him right back, and we stand there, still trying to figure out what exactly it is that we're hearing, but also seeing. I keep looking around for people, thinking there must be a source for the voices, but I find no one in sight. Maggie is now facing the other direction because she's on my back, and I hear her get loud, barking, snarling, and really giving something a piece of her mind. My husband turns before I do, and instantly I hear, "What the fuck?" To which I spin around and I see a giant deer standing in the middle of the end of the path. Antlers matching the others in size. Only this time, we can see how massive the whole thing is. Worst of all, it's got its mouth open. I don't know. Something about that sight sent many chills up my spine. Chance is now whimpering like crazy, and Maggie's moved from snarling to whimpering. We both quickly look in the other direction, and we no longer see the large antlers poking from the trees. We don't even discuss it. We just decide to start fast walking back to camp. We thought the noises would at least stop, but the sound of voices continued to follow us. We both ran. We kept looking back, and at some point, we both realized it was gone. No longer in the middle of the path, and the voices had stopped too. We tried to be brave, to laugh it off, but we couldn't. Anytime we would try, we'd just go silent and then start talking about how weird it really was. Also, the dogs refused to leave the trailer after that. This spot wasn't for us, we decided. We'd left with intentions of finding a new camping spot, but for some reason, at least not that evening, we couldn't bring ourselves to head into the woods again. We opted instead for a Walmart parking lot. The next day, though we both said we weren't that spooked anymore, we made our way home. A camping trip that normally lasts us 6 days, we cut short after just 2. We still haven't decided where we're going this summer, but it very well might be somewhere outside of Tennessee. Has anyone else ever experienced something like this? It's been a long time since this happened. I think 2006. Can't remember the exact year, but it was shortly before I entered high school. I did one of those week-long Christian summer camps with my school at Hume Lake in California. I've done a little internet searching, but never found other stories connected with the campground. I'm hoping by sharing mine that maybe someone else will have experienced something similar in that place. One night, everybody in the camp went into the big auditorium, and speakers talked about life, death, Jesus, the works. They had this silent time, and I was feeling emotional at that point because a cousin of mine had passed away within the last year, and everything they talked about just combined overwhelmed me. So I wanted to go back to the cabin to be by myself and cry a bit. I'm normally a scaredy cat with a big imagination of the dark, but with all that I was thinking of, I didn't feel scared to walk alone. The cabin was close to the edge of the camp, with a dirt road separating it from the woods. There were orange streetlights on the road that I was walking up, but not on that road where it would tee off. At the T in the road, right in the tree line, was a human-sized white shape, like it was made of white light. No distinguishable legs or arms, but I could clearly see a head and shoulders. So picture a head shape down to the shoulders, and then the sides, they just went straight down to the ground. There were no strange sounds or anything else. I fucking bolted back down the way I came. I bumped into a group of cabin mates since the auditorium event finished. One tried to say that maybe I saw a cougar or wild animal. For years, I would involuntarily tear up and get chills and goosebumps when retelling this. Since then, I also tear up when I hear others' first-person ghost stories. I wish I hadn't gotten scared at that time. But anyway, I've always hoped that I'm not the only one to have seen something at Hume Lake. Not too long ago, I was home alone while watching some 100 Days Minecraft Demon Slayer stuff, and I heard the door to the basement door open. Now, the kitchen door has a specific squeak that I'm very used to by now, due to me living in this house for almost 12 years. This was around 9 a.m. My mom left at 8:45. I was confused because my mom wasn't supposed to be back yet. She was supposed to be gone for around an hour. I got up and I grabbed a bat, knowing that shit was about to go down. I slowly crept towards my kitchen, and by the time I got to the dining room, I heard the door close. This door, by the way, is hard to open at a certain point. I walked into the kitchen and I heard loud rustling coming from the other side of the door. I gripped the baseball bat tight and walked over to the door and opened it. The moment I opened the door to the garage slammed. Note that this door is heavy and it can't really be moved by an air vacuum. I thought it was my mom, and it was just a coincidence, and she was bringing in the recycling bin. But I saw no recycling bin. I still thought it was a coincidence. I opened the door, thinking I'd see my mom. I saw no proof of anybody. Freaks me out even writing this. Also, it's just the more that I think about it, the more it becomes clear that it wasn't anything that science can explain. Some background context. 6 or 7 years ago, my family had a family reunion, and my cousins decided to rent a beach house because why not? When my family and all my cousins arrived at the beach house, we all unpacked our stuff and I went upstairs because that's where all of my cousins were. There were about 5 of us in the room from what I remember. We were the youngest cousins at the time. I was 10 and the youngest in that room was 4. Probably 15-20 minutes later, the door opened on its own. Keep in mind, the door was closed all the way. There was absolutely no wind, and we were the only ones upstairs. I got up and closed the door, not questioning anything. Then I continued to play with my cousins. The door opened again, a few more times. The 6th time it happened, I opened the door and I don't know what I was expecting, but I was pretty stupid when I was 10. I whispered, "If you're angry, grab my hand." Then I stuck out my arm. Believe it or not, I felt a tug. I was a little spooked. I just closed the door again and continued playing. It didn't open again. Around 7 p.m., my uncle came out of the bathroom and he asked, "Was there any wind?" Because the fucking mirror was swaying. We all looked at each other. We told him that there was no wind and just shook it off. When we all went to bed, I woke up around 1 in the morning. I looked at the window, and there was a shadow figure. Everyone was asleep. I blinked, and it wasn't there anymore. I turned back, and my brother, who was 1 at the time, was sitting up, looking at the stairs. I was trying to see what he was looking at, and I saw the same shadow figure looking at him. I pulled my brother down into the bed, and I made him face me. We both fell asleep afterwards. We woke up, and I told everyone. They were all in shock. Then my mom asks, "Wait, was everyone sleeping?" Because I heard people playing mahjong around that time. I was confused because nobody was up. I told her nobody was up. We decided to leave a day early because we were all a little spooked. Before we left, one of my older cousins, he's a psychic medium, he was drawn to this one place as if someone was telling him to go there. He went into the house asking everyone for a shovel. I don't remember how he got the shovel, but I followed him and I saw him dig in this area near the house. What he dug up, it looked like a grave. If I had to assume, the house was built over an old graveyard. We covered the grave with leaves, coconuts, and flowers. We left afterwards. But still, I think something followed me home from that. I've been a wrecker for the past 45 years. But before officially becoming one myself, I was an apprentice. I got my apprenticeship when I was 22. I'd just gotten back from serving in Vietnam. I was in the 23rd Infantry Division. But after my discharge, I needed a job. My uncle got me hooked up with a friend of his who was a heavy-duty wrecker, and it's been history ever since. I mention my service in the military because I'd like it to be known that I'm not faint of heart. I've experienced the horrors of war firsthand. From time to time, I'm still visited by the demons that followed me home. I'm not squeamish. But one job that we pulled up on in my years of apprenticeship was something I'd never seen before. The first time I'd ever lost my lunch from a sight I wish I'd never seen. A freight company reached out to us, asking that we keep an eye out for a truck that's been missing for a couple of days. No word from the driver. The delivery never made its way to its destination. The company gives an approximate route that the driver could have taken, and that afternoon, me and my mentor are out on the highway looking for the missing 18-wheeler. Sure enough, it doesn't take long for us to notice a big chunk of guardrail lifted and bent off the side of the road. We pull over and we see that just beyond this guardrail is a deep cliff. And upon closer inspection, hidden amongst the leaves and treetops, we spied the back end of the truck. It looked like it went straight down into this cliff and stuck like a dart, the only visible part being the back end. My mentor tells me that we need to get down there and see how extensive the damage is and check for the almost certain casualties inside the front. Being the good apprentice I was, I didn't complain when he suggested tying a tow cable around my hips and lowering me down there. The actual scaling of this drop-off wasn't the problem. I was in the best shape of my life, and it felt like the drills that we do back in boot camp. I reached the bottom of the cliff within a couple of minutes. No problem. When I hit the ground floor of the forest, I was able to see the whole truck. Well, at least a shrine of bent metal that used to be an 18-wheeler transport freight. I unstrap myself from the tow cable, and I make my way to the vertical truck. I climb up the engine hood and I shimmy my way to the driver's side door, using the rearview mirror for leverage. I pop the handle, and I fall when gravity swings the door open, along with the rearview mirror I was holding on to. This sends me about 10 feet on my ass into the bushes below. This also shakes the truck, and for a moment, I think it's going to come dislodged and crush me. After all the commotion stops, I once again climb up the hood and shimmy my way over to the now open driver's side door. Hanging from the bottom metal step attached under the door, I start to pull myself up into the cab. As I'm pulling in, the first thing I see is a pair of legs pinned between the steering wheel and the seat. As I suspected, the driver did not survive this accident. But I'm startled when I hear a low moan expel from just above me, along with what I think is twitching. I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, this guy may have actually lived through this somehow. I climb the rest of the way up, gripping onto the steering wheel. I'm able to get my footing and balance on the twisted metal. What I saw was unimaginable carnage on a level I didn't know existed. A visceral nightmare that only got worse. The inside of the cab is covered in chunks and pieces of flesh. The man's upper body has been torn apart by animals, and I suddenly put together the twitching I previously felt was actually the head of a bear digging into the man's body from the passenger side. I scream and I fall from the cab. After I hit the ground, I hear the bear fall and hit the ground about 10 yards to my feet. I get to my feet and I make a run for the tow cable, screaming for my mentor to start hoisting me up. The bear is instantly on my heels. I'm forced to start free climbing the tow cable up this rock cliff. My mentor didn't hear my cries for help until I was halfway up the cable, and then he pressed the button to start cranking me in. When I'm at the top, I start to puke. My hands are stained with rope burns and blood from the steering wheel. Ignoring what's in front of him, my mentor tells me that he's radioed the authorities, that they're on their way, so we need to start hooking up the cables. After, I just stare blankly for a moment. He finally says that I can tell him all about it while we get the hookups on. Needless to say, he took me out for a beer after that one. Come to find out, that was something not even he had seen yet, but he had seen a lot. It was after that job that he basically gave me the talk, telling me that I should decide quickly if this was something I really wanted to do, that it wouldn't always be bears, but it might more often than not involve death. I've got a lot of stories, and they aren't all bad. My mentor all those years ago was right, though. It does involve a lot of death, but so did the military, the only other job I've really known. At least with wrecking, despite the name, I didn't have to hurt anyone. When it's not total carnage, you're usually saving somebody's life or helping them out of an otherwise impossible situation, so yeah, I chose to stick with it. I live in an apartment that has an obvious ghost or spirit living here too. While living here, I've had 2 roommates. All 3 of us have witnessed the exact same thing from this specific spirit. When we were the only ones home and would take a shower, it would sound like the front door would open, like someone was coming home. We would get out of the shower expecting someone to be home. Every time this happened, we opened the bathroom door to find out that in fact, no one came through the front door. I live alone currently, and I took a shower this evening. The noise and feeling this time was a little different. In the evening, I push a 50-pound piece of furniture up against the door to prevent intruders. This specific evening, I heard a bang at the door, and while it sounded like there was a struggle to get in. After hearing that noise, it sounded like a door halfway with a creaking noise. It didn't frighten me. It actually hasn't really frightened anyone, just confused because we know what we heard. Does anyone have any idea of why the spirit is doing this when someone is home alone and in the shower? I heard once that spirits were attracted to water. Is this true? And why not in the shower with a roommate home? Well, looking forward to your insight. Just a disclaimer, I don't suffer from sleep paralysis, and I have no history of it. One time, when I was a teenager, I went to bed after staying up late playing Xbox with my friend. At the time, I was trying to get used to going to sleep without the TV on or any other light source, so I was still a little nervous about being in complete dark. I actually ended up freaking myself out by imagining scary shit before finally falling asleep. I woke up not too long after, and something told me to look at the foot of my bed. So I did. That's when I saw a black silhouette of a person just standing there, staring at me. I initially didn't freak out because I knew that I must just be seeing things, so I rubbed my eyes and I allowed them to focus a bit, fully expecting for whatever inanimate objects my mind was playing tricks on me with to be revealed. Not only did the shadow figure not disappear, but just at that moment, it moved. That's when the horrifying realization that it was real sank in, and I immediately began to freak out. I desperately wanted to scoot backwards to get as far away from it as possible, while also putting myself within reach of the bat that I keep next to my bed. But I was literally frozen with fear. Not knowing what else to do, I began just yelling for my parents, while never taking my eyes off of the figure, who began to bend down just as my mom mercifully turned on the light. And just like that, it was gone. It took me a good hour or more to calm down. By the time I was finally able to go back to sleep, it was dawn. One of the strangest parts of the whole ordeal is that my mom claimed that I didn't wake them up when I began calling for them. Instead, they awoke when they heard me shouting, "Who is it? Who is it?" Which I have absolutely zero recollection of. Ever since, I've slept with my TV on. Interested in people's opinions on this. I work nights, and on my days off, I generally keep the same pattern of sleep. I was awake at roughly 4 a.m. and decided to pop outside for a smoke before I got some sleep. I wasn't overly tired, so what I saw shouldn't have been affected by that. I was rolling my smoke in my living room when I hear talking in the direction of my back door. Knowing my back door is securely locked, I head into my kitchen to check through the windows when I see a large deer very close to the window, looking in. It was at eye level with me, and I'm 5'4". After about a minute of eye contact, it rounded the corner of my patio. I returned to my living room to check out the window, where it should have been visible, and it was totally gone. It had no escape routes. It's a dead end, with no gaps in the fence. It also didn't set off our outdoor lighting, which is normally very sensitive to movement. Even cats normally trigger it. Large deer are not native to my area of the UK. We only get small roe deer. Even if it was just a very big deer, that doesn't explain the talking that I heard the moment before.
"You ready?" Dan asked. "Yeah," I said as I finished loading the back of the truck. I had only moved into town a year back. It wasn't even something I had been planned for. But rising housing costs where I grew up made me want to move elsewhere rather than go back to crash with my parents. Lo and behold, when I even managed to get a job at a decent company, and they even offered the help with the moving costs to join one of their branches, and here I was. At least, I thought at the time that this was a decent enough company. It was a charity, though I had to admit that at the time I didn't notice that they seemed to have a lot of things for a non-profit. This should have been the first red flag, but I didn't pay it any mind. "So let's go then, rookie," Dan said. Dan was a couple of years older than me, but he had been nice enough during orientation and what all. Our current job was one that takes us to a city. We were setting up a camp for homeless people. It was a well enough cause, though something I'd weighed in my mind. "Do we really need to go so far for this?" I asked him again. We were going a pretty long ways off. The trip itself would take over 2 days. Granted, we would be paid for all the hours and the company paid for our housing as well. But why go through all that difficulty? A nearby city was just 2 hours off, and it wasn't as if where we were going was much bigger either. It's complicated, but we just want to expand our reach," Dan said, the same as when I had asked him last time about it. "I wouldn't worry too much about it. Let's just focus on getting some of these people the help they need." He flashes me a smile and began talking about football, and I forgot about the questions soon enough. The camp as it was went well enough for us doing quite a good job, at least I thought so. It mainly involved giving out clothes and food. It was time for us to leave though, and as we began to get ready to set back, I noticed something. Are we taking some people back with us?" I asked, confused. I hadn't been told anything about this. 3 people, 2 men and a woman, were riding along back with us in the back. "Yeah, they must have got some issues which I think we could deal better with back home," Dan said. "They've all agreed to it, so it's no biggie." I was a bit superstitious now. But when I did talk to the 3 of them, it was obvious that they were there of their own volition, so I thought, all right. I did notice something off. The normally extroverted Dan didn't go out of his way to talk too much with the others. It was as if he was actively trying to avoid them for some reason. That said, we were reaching the last leg of our journey. Town was back in sight. Though as I was beginning to dream of going back to my bed, Dan tapped me on the shoulder as we went to a halt. I sat up a little and tried to blink the sleep away. We were practically in the middle of nowhere. "Come on," he whispered to me as he opened the door and beckoned me to step outside. I was confused, but in my drowsy haze, I didn't think too much about it as I got off. "So, what's up?" I asked him. He put his fingers to his lips and beckoned me to follow him. Once we were 10 minutes away from the truck, he told me to crouch down. "What's going on?" I asked again. It looked like we were still 2 hours away from the town's border. He put his finger to his lips. Just stay quiet for now, will you?" It was then that his head twitched as if he had suddenly seen something. I looked in the direction but spotted nothing, until a minute later when I saw the silhouette of what looked like a dog, or far more likely a wolf, I realized. "What's up with this?" I asked. He put a finger to his lips again and hissed at me. "Don't you know when to keep quiet?" "Tell me what's going on," I said. He glared at me, but seemed to realize I was only going to make a ruckus if he didn't say something. "You know what a Skinwalker is?" he asked. I scratched my head. No. "An urban legend, that's what," Dan said. "At least, I thought so too. They're kind of like vampires, I guess. They're supposed to have been people who betrayed their families for immortality and walk around wearing the skins of their victims, usually animals. You'll find all sorts of stories about them if you go on the internet. They have other powers too, mimicking voices of their victims, which is especially creepy." He shuddered a bit. "What's this got to do with anything?" I asked. "Long ago, this land used to belong to a Native American tribe," Dan continued. "As you could imagine, they weren't all that happy to give up when the colonizers arrived. Our side, I guess you would call it, realized that they were going to lose when they made a deal with the devil, or what devils are to the people around these parts. They invited some of the natives to a discussion in this area, and then agreed to let the Skinwalkers in. I told you they were like vampires, right? They can't go on to someone's property without an invitation." A bead of sweat rolled down my neck. I looked at the horizon again. There were more wolves now. In exchange for getting rid of the natives, the original founders gave the Skinwalker blanket permission to wander in the town and any house in its territory, Dan said. "If they wanted to, they could get into our houses and kill every single one of us. They won't though, so long as they're fed enough." I then realized why he had brought those people along with him, and why we had gone so far and picked up homeless people. So little attention would be paid if they were to disappear suddenly one day. Before he could stop me, I was sprinting back towards the truck. "What are you doing? Do you want to get yourself killed?" he screamed behind me. I ignored him and got into the driver's seat, turned the key, thank goodness he had left it in the ignition, and began to move the truck to get out of the area as soon as possible. The Skinwalkers were closing in on me though. They no longer looked like animals now, but the misshapen creatures they really were. I could tell given the odd way they moved. As I slammed the accelerator, I heard a loud thump on the roof of the truck and then a loud crash on the side of me. One of them had gotten onto the roof and fallen off. I turned my head for a brief second outside the window, and then I saw it. There was a monster, running on all fours, somehow keeping up with me even though I must have been going at least 60 an hour. It looked like a skeletonized human, kind of like those pictures of people who had nearly been starved to death turned up to 11, wearing the fur of a wolf on its back. In the rearview mirror, I could see 2 more of them trailing right behind me. I gulped and slammed the accelerator even harder, praying that I would survive this. Eventually, it looked like they had either had enough of chasing me with no result, or I had reached some boundary of whatever limit they would cross. However, it wasn't until the sun came up that I would finally breathe a sigh of relief. I didn't even stop near the closest rest stop, worried that it also fell into the jurisdiction of the Skinwalkers. It was only when it was close to midday, and I was nearly falling asleep at the wheel that I stopped, told the others, who were quite confused, to get off. I think I slept for the whole day after that, and I had just told the others that it all had been canceled and they had to go back. I tried forgetting about the place as much as I could, and for a while it seemed to have worked. I got a new job. The pay wasn't as good as the earlier one, but had no deals with supernatural creatures either. I even began saving up for a down payment for a house. One day, though, curiosity got the better of me, and I asked around about the town. To my surprise, no one had seemed to hear anything about it, or heard from anyone living in it ever since, well, the incident. Anyone who had gone to investigate never returned. It's given me a horrible feeling. Did I end up costing the lives of everyone in that town? Or is it that the Skinwalkers didn't kill everyone there, but simply guarded so that no one could go out or in? I don't know which is worse, but I have no desire to find out. I can't even name the town. I don't want someone out there coming to hunt me in retribution if they have ties to that place. Let me give you a warning, though. I think if you drive close to where I'm talking about, you'll realize what the town's name is. All I could say is, for your own safety, please stay as far away as possible from it.
Just like that, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. But don't miss a brand new one every Friday night. I want to thank those who shared their stories. A big thanks to all of you for listening. And also, thanks again to Campfire Tales for that last story. I hope you all will check him out. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to The Darkest Hour, and tap the bell so you never miss a thing. I sure do appreciate all of it. A huge shout out to all of my patrons for their unwavering support. MISANTHROPIA, Shane Q, Monica L, The Dark Cosmos, Zoe Watt, Shelly B, Rat Girl, ALISHA S, and ERIN G. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining my Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour. Keep up with me and all things Darkest Hour over on my Instagram @thedarkesthouryt. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, Amanda, darkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.